Spouting Horn, one of the first spots that the Smith family got to know in 1941 when we arrived in September. And a little story about Spouting Horn. Over there to the left is a giant hole which was an active spout back in the turn of the century. It spouted so high that once they put in sugarcane fields out behind us, the plantation owners had to dynamite it because the salt water was of their crops. So Spouting Horn, as we know it today, is this hole in the lava over here to the right, which isn't doing much today, but we've been here when the spout has been as high as 40 feet. When I was a boy, we would walk down there and fool around, but it is quite dangerous. In fact, about a year ago, a young man fell in there and was killed. So there are signs posted now warning you about venturing down there. However, when this was all open, we used to picnic. We used to bring our Boy Scout troops, and in 1963, when Lillian and I were here with Grandma Smith, we had a big picnic over here to the right. Lots of our scout troop was to climb on top of that rock there and have our picture taken. In fact, I have a picture, black and white picture of taken by Scott's grandfather of about a dozen of us sitting up on that rock. It's still there. It's probably been there 1,000 years. But when Grandma Smith was here, we would sit down there and bring our sandwiches and have a lovely picnic. So Spouting Horn has many, many happy memories for us. There are times when the waves can crash up against the shoreline and it's very spectacular. But today it's quite benign. One of the things that I will point out is along the coastline, around that last point, is what we call Lawai Valley. It was purchased in 1935 by the hotel magnate John Allerton. He bought the whole valley from the heirs of the royalty, and it became private. No one could go in there except with the Allerton's permission. And the reason for that is that Mr. Allerton and his adopted son, Greg, liked to swim in the nude. And so women were not permitted except by special invitation. And one of those who got the special invitation was Scott's mother, Lillian, and that is another story which we will tell later. But you have to go along the coastline and then it's blocked off. That today has been purchased by the National Oceanic Institute, which we've all toured, and Scott and Corey are going to tour while they're here. Scott is shooting these wild roosters here, and there are a number of stories on how they got here. When I grew up, the only roosters on the island were up in the Kokay forest, and we'd be awakened by them in the morning. But when Hurricane Iwa hit in 1959, the winds in the mountains blew a number of them down here into the lowlands, and they multiplied very quickly. Well, when Hurricane Iniki hit 12 years later, the story goes that people thought that the hurricane would wipe out all the roosters. But as they'd poked their heads out of their homes hoping to see the roosters gone, they were out there having a great time in the 120-mile-an-hour winds. And Russ Taba was the one that told me this story about how he hoped they would get rid of the roosters, but there were more than ever. And there are very few places on the island where you can stay and not be roosterized in the mornings. The natives, of course, or the locals, they get very used to it and they don't even hear it. It's like we're living in a big city and the noise becomes part of the background. But those of us that come to visit, we use earplugs and all kinds of devices because they start at about 4:30 in the morning. Your mother doesn't seem to be bothered, but boy, I am look for places where the roosters are as far away as possible. But it's a great story. This is the only island that has them as multiplied as they are. But apparently they're protected because you never see anybody attempting to catch them or have them for cow-cow. At Kukuyula Small Boat Harbor, and in past years, behind where we're sitting, this was where in 1942 the U.S. Army trained its soldiers preparing for Pacific landings. Right behind us. We would come down here on Sundays and watch the soldiers descending from huge nets, and a wooden wall had been built right where that boat is moored in the background, and the soldiers would come in their packs in their full uniforms with their sergeants, and they would climb up the back and they would descend down those nets just as if they were coming off ships and into small assault craft. So what we were seeing were the actual training for soldiers that were going to assault Saipan and Iwo Jima and other islands right here in this little harbor. Behind us was a camp. This was a Japanese fishing camp, and all up you can see the remnants of a road, and my schoolmates lived up in here in this little camp of Kukuyula, which has been gone probably for 30 years now. So this location has memories for us as well. The hillside behind us were pineapples. This was called Pono back in the teens and up through 1974, when the last pineapple on this island was phased out. But I used to ride my bicycle up into the pineapple fields and then coast down this little hill behind us. Today, as we've been told, this whole area, probably 40,000 acres, is going to be developed into resort housing, and it's taken the developers probably 10 years to get all the environmental and county approvals, but it's just starting to go in now. So what used to be pineapple fields is going to be housing for people coming in from the mainland, probably. Right behind me is what is called Stone House. It was the original property of Dr. Herbert Waterhouse, and it was purchased by his father-in-law, James Smith, the property here in the 1850s. When Hurricane Iniki hit, Mrs. Deese was living in here with her third husband, and she refused to leave. She was going to wait out the storm, but her husband, a part Hawaiian guy, literally picked her up and carried her out. And even though the house was badly damaged, it wasn't leveled, and they saved her life. Mother and I visited her in Santa Cruz thereafter. Now behind us, whole spread of 4 homes. It's again all part of the Waterhouse estate, and there are 4 cottages which they rent out. This huge house is being built under the direction of Bill McCord, the son-in-law. I was baptized in May of 1947 in the little bay there, along with 4 or 5 other of our youth group. And I have a certificate signed by the pastor at the time documenting that occasion. So this spot has good memories for us. And you can see what a lovely location it is, and still owned by a family that came here 150 years ago. We're at Koloa School, where I went from 4th through 8th grade, and during those years I only had one other white boy in one of my classes, which was my 8th grade class. Other than that, I was there with Filipino, Chinese, Hawaiian, Japanese, and Portuguese young people. The original school which we went to, my sister Ann and I went to, was burned down in the early 1970s by an arsonist that they've never uncovered, and unfortunately all the records went with it. I've been able to keep my report cards, which showed that my arithmetic was as poor then as it is today. But after I returned from the mainland in 1947, my mother was given a housing on a school lot, on a school house over here, which Lillian and I stayed in for 2 weeks in 1963. It leaked at night. It had rats in the ceilings. It was infested with termites. We had lizards on, geckos on the windows, but it was home as far as we were concerned. And my chores during my teenage days were to do the washing every Saturday with the old wringer washer, and I would listen to the ball games and do the washing. And it was my job also to mow the lawn, as well as to help wash the dishes. Now, Scott's great-grandmother came to live with us there, Emma Ekfall, for several years before she died, and she had her own little room on the back lanai. So that was our home for a number of years until it was torn down. Behind me is a Norfolk pine, and we take this pine as a sample of the one that sat in the front yard of the parsonage, which we're going to visit. And I was told that it rotted out and had to be taken down about 2 years ago. That Norfolk pine was twice as high, if you can visualize, as the one behind us. And I climbed up almost to the top. And it was the tallest tree on the island of Kauai at the time we came here in 1941. And the limbs were big enough to hold a person, which allowed me to climb up there unbeknownst to my parents. But it was a great view. You could see all the way to the ocean, and I only did it once. We're looking at the parsonage for the Koloa, what used to be the Koloa Union Church. At that time it was Congregational, now it is United Church of Christ. Some of the happiest days of my boyhood were in this house between September of 1941 and June of 1946. And my bedroom was this first room right here where it says Ikomo Mai. So that was my personal bedroom. My sister and the family lived on the other side of the house. And my dad's study was the far door there. When the war broke out, the civil defense feared, as has happened in Europe, that the enemy was going to drop incendiary bombs, if you can believe something as absurd as that, where we have trade winds and so on. So we were required to put sand in all the homes that had a double story. So we had the equivalent of probably a pickup truck load of sand in the attic of this house. And my dad built steps, tacked steps on the side of the house so that you could get up on the roof, which at that time was not tin. So instead of using that for fire purposes, the kids, I would climb up on the roof and we would play on the roof, which could have been dangerous, but who's to say? I watched my dad plant that as a 3-foot sapling in 1946. And the folks that have lived here in the years since, the pastors, have enjoyed, I'm told, the fruit of it. I've never had a mango from that tree, but it's a nice memory to the thoughtfulness of my dad, Reverend Howard Smith, who planted that tree in 1946. That little ladder, and I remember it very fondly because we used to climb it, was where those wires are. And they would allow you to climb up on the roof, and we would romp all over the roof, much to my mother's dismay when she'd hear us pounding around up there. We're looking at a tamarind tree, which is a tree imported from India, and I'm guessing that this is probably the primary specimen on the island of Kauai. And as youngsters, we love to tap into the fruit. The tamarind is a very, fruit of the tree is a very spicy, and we would, when it was ripe, we would love to eat it with salt, pepper, and sugar. We would dip. Now, I don't think the tree still has the tree house that my father built in 1942, but we had a tree house up on the first level there you can't see now. The other thing I want to point out here is that when the war broke out, homes were required to have air raid shelters. And our air raid shelter, which was dug by people of the church, was to the left of the tamarind tree there. It was about, 15 feet long, 4.5 feet wide, and 7 feet deep. And it had a roof on it. Unfortunately, whenever it rained, the rain would come in, and we never occupied it. The mosquitoes occupied it, but we never occupied it. And eventually, I suspect when the threat of invasion came sometime after we left here in the late mid-40s, it was filled in. There's no sign of it now, but that's where the air raid shelter was. We have a beautiful lanai on this parsonage, and it was where my dad set up the ping pong table, where we entertained our army troop from across the stone fence here, and it's where I learned my ping pong. And my dad loved to trot me out as a elementary school kid and beat these soldiers in ping pong. I was kind of his exhibition, you might say. But that ping pong table was probably the most popular spot for our GIs and also for our young people of the church, right on that porch. Behind us are a row of hau bushes. We used to call them habush, but it's hau, H-A-U. They didn't exist back in the early 40s, but there was a stone wall there between our property and the Waterhouse property. In April 1st, 1942, the first company of American soldiers landed on the island. They were troops from New York State, a National Guard unit, and they were barracked for the next 3 years. Different army encampments came in. They were barracked, and they dug their latrines for these 200 GIs within 40 yards of our house. Now, as a kid, I don't remember ever smelling it, but I can imagine that my mother was horrified when they put their latrines so close to our homes. I never heard her complain about it, as you would not expect Gertrude Ekval Smith to complain about anything. But the soldiers were there, we were here, and frankly, as kids, we had a great time. On the night of December 7th, 1941, after we had been informed by radio telephone from Oahu that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, the civil defense people on the island dictated that all homes had to be blacked out. Well, we hadn't gotten around to putting tar paper on our windows of this parsonage yet, so we had all the lights out and were using candles. But I can remember, about the only thing I remember of that evening was that sometime after supper, after it had gotten dark, my dad and mother were standing out here, and my sister and I walked out right where I'm pointing there. It was a beautiful starlit night. And my dad looked up at the heavens. We didn't know whether the Japanese were going to still attack the island. It was a very uncertain time. And I remember him talking about the uncertainty and trusting in God at this point in time. You can see on the plaque, Smith Memorial Parsonage. That's not our Smiths. That's the Dr. James Smith that came here in about the 1840s, was the first medical doctor on the island of Kauai, and it is his descendants that are the Waterhouses that we've talked about so far. He was a very religious man, and he founded the Koloa Union Church, which we are going to stop at a little later. Cirrus has probably been here 80, 90 years. It seems to be the most hardy of plants. And I have, at night, it comes out with very nice white blooms. But I remember this location because this is where the soldiers marched. They would be rousted out by their sergeants and lined up down at the end of the street, and then they would march up and down, up 2, 3, 4, before they went to chow. And this was from about 1942 for the next several years. Here are the soldiers marching back and forth up this street. Behind us is the parish hall for what today is the UCC Church. But back in my day, it was the parish hall for the Koloa Union Church, where we held our Sunday school sessions. And I was in there at about 9 o'clock in the morning on December 7th, 1941, when the teachers called us all together and said it's time that Pearl Harbor was under attack, or whether they just told us Sunday school is dismissed and you're to go home. But I remember walking out of here, walking to the sidewalk, across the street, and going back home, and that was the start of, for us, for World War II. In September 1941, my father was called to be pastor of the Koloa Union Church, which he pastored for the next 5 years. And it was in this sanctuary that I made a profession of faith, and which holds many happy memories for us. This church was founded by Dr. James Smith, the descendant of the Waterhouses, and in more recent years has become an Assemblies of God church. There's a long story on how that happened, but suffice to say that it was a church where we had many, many wonderful memories. These lawns have memories for me because I had a school job, an after-school job, to once a week mow the lawns here of the church for, I believe it was 50 cents an hour, which was good pay in those days. And it was with the old hand mowers. I got the job through my mom's good graces at the church. I'm not sure that the Filipino yardman, whose job it might have been, ever appreciated having this young boy do what he later did in years, but I certainly appreciated it. It was a wonderful after-school job. It was tough to mow, believe me. This is a very tough grass by hand push. But as I say, I enjoyed it, appreciated it, in spite of the centipedes and scorpions that infest the back end of the lot there. During Hurricane Iniki, which was the last one to hit, that steeple blew down, and we have on tape a videotape that somebody had taken showing literally the steeple coming down. Well, it's obviously been replaced, thankfully. See, at one time there were two churches, the brown church, the white church.
And why was that? Why was there brown?
The brown church was the Hawaiian church. The native Hawaiians. They weren't all native Hawaiians, but that was a Hawaiian church. And they owned the land that this church was built on. It was on a 100-year lease. And when it expired, they wouldn't sell it. They wanted their land. Well, the church was on it. Now, the people here could have torn the church down, but they were too gracious to do that. So they literally gave this church to the people over there. It eventually became a charismatic church. Now, the parish hall was on land owned by the UCC, and so they built what became the next church over, which today is the United Church of Christ, the parsonage belonging to that one. But you can see the kind of convoluted history of the town and the churches in the town. It says Koloa Missionary Church, but when I grew up here, this was the home of Dr. Albert Herbert Waterhouse and his family. And I played with their children, the Deese children, in this home for many a time. When Dr. Waterhouse died and his widow died, they donated the old building to the Koloa Missionary Church, which was founded in effect by people that had left the Koloa Union Church. Now, my mother, Gertrude, played the piano here in the mornings. That was her job, which she loved to do. And then in the evenings, she would go over and play the piano in the evening service in the Kapa Missionary Church. But we've known all the pastors that have come through this church in the last 50 years, and they just celebrated their 50th anniversary not too long ago. What is called the Koloa Plantation Building has been restored, lovingly restored by the Knudsen Trust. In the years from roughly 1850 through 1960, it was the Koloa Clinic. And it was where Dr. Waterhouse practiced. He was the only doctor there for many years. There were literally hundreds of babies born there. And I was a unwilling patient there only once that I can remember. But it was the only hospital between Lihue and Waimea. So it got lots of patients from the plantations in the area. And we're very happy that the Knudsens thought enough of it to restore it. It's pretty commercial today, but it was a clinic and served many people in the community. I'm with my golfing buddy and Kauai High School alumnus friend, Pastor Niles Kageyama, who's pastor here of the Koloa Missionary Church that just celebrated, what, 50th?
About 5 years ago, 50th anniversary.
50th anniversary, and are in the midst of a monumental building program now. Tell us a little bit about where you stand on that.
Well, we are just waiting for one final report to come in from the Hawaii Historical Commission.
Yes.
Once that report comes in, we expect to have the approval for a building project.
Fantastic. Well, we're praying for you, and I know you're in the process of soliciting funds, and we'd like to be a part of that too, Niles.
Great.
We'll take care of that.
We'll take anything.
You betcha.
It's on tape.
Niles and I have played golf on a number of, at Kukiolono and the old, whatever they call the course now.
Wailua.
Wailua, and also the one that is at Grove Farm.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah,
got
yeah.
soaking wet
Oh,
the last
yeah.
time we were
Oh,
there.
yeah,
Back
yeah.
when it was 9 holes. Niles is a great athlete, I want you to know. He
Oh.
played for Coach Seiichi Ono, Champ Ono, on championship teams along with, you came after Dave?
Yeah.
After David, which who we're going to see later, Dave Iha.
He's also
But Dave, Niles and Eileen are dear, dear brethren of ours, and we love to come visit them and pray for them regularly. You'd never know it, but the little shack behind me that says Old Koloa Town was the original telephone exchange for the village of Koloa and surrounding areas. An old manual switchboard in there, and it was in that building that Scott's grandmother served during World War II as a censor. It was her job to make sure that the soldiers that made phone calls home did not give away what the Army considered restricted military secrets. And she never talked about it because she was supposed to not speak about her job, but she did tell us years later that the hardest thing in her life was to have to cut off one of these GIs who said something that was prohibited. That was very heart-rendering for her. Now, across the street, we have what used to be the post office right there. And the Smiths had a box number. Everybody that got their mail in town, there was no mail delivery. You had to come to the post office and open your own box, which had a little dial code on, and it was a very popular spot for us. The Salvation Army Hall across the street. I spoke earlier about having one white boy with me. He was the son of the Salvation Army captain, my 8th grade playmate. And it was he and I that in 1946 decided we were going to pick our favorite ball teams to root for. And we flipped, and I won, so I got to pick which major league team I was going to root for. Well, I wasn't very dumb. I saw that the Red Sox in June were already 10 games ahead in the American League, so I picked the Red Sox, and he picked the Yankees. I'm still a Red Sox fan, and it's been 50 years since I've first won anything significant in the World Series, but I've been a loyal Red Sox fan ever since. Nauwili Harbor is the main port of call on the island. Today it welcomes a cruise ship or two a week, and it was here that we landed by inter-island steamer in September of 1941 at the docks to my far right. Another noteworthy fact is that on January the 12th, 1942, a Japanese submarine surfaced a mile and a half off the harbor mouth and fired 3 shells, apparently attempting to hit some of the harbor facilities. But they overshot the harbor, and the 3 shells landed in the cane fields beyond the harbor and set a couple of harmless fires. That was the only enemy action on this island during World War II. So Nauwili Harbor still is a very picturesque spot, and they have since put a long breakwater out there, which you can see in the far distance. This is the, call it the Menehune fish ponds, but it's actually the ponds that were stocked with fish for the royalty during ancient times. And it's not very deep down there. I've never been in it. You've never seen anybody in it, but I would guess it's probably 10 feet deep or so in the fish pond area. To the left of the fish ponds is the Huleia River, and that goes up probably a good 10 miles, and it's navigable. We kayak. They have kayaking tours that go all the way up there, and probably on the slopes of those hills where I'm pointing is where the Raiders of the Lost Ark scene, the opening scene, was filmed up on the flanks of that ridge line, and in the jungle areas where our buddy Harrison Ford comes charging out of the cave, and he gallops across a field, and that's all on rice lands up there just beyond us. So this is one of our picturesque stops along the way. In this very lovely cemetery, Scott's great-grandmother Emma Ekfall from China was buried when she died in Hawaii in 1953 at the age of about 83. And a number of years later, Scott's grandmother Gertrude Ekfall Smith died here in June of 1975, and she was cremated by request, and her ashes are interred here. We had the ceremony on a very lovely day. Uncle John Beck and Aunt Grace were here from Oahu. And although Anne, my sister Anne, didn't get here in time for the ceremony, she arrived a day or so later, and we spent several more days on Kauai cleaning up Mother's cottage in Kapa. So I want to point out another stone right here. We had talked about the senior play, and my wife in that senior play was Roxana West, and it was quite hilarious because she was about twice my size. And as you can see, we were both born in 1932. She died in the South Pacific of some disease sometime later, Roxana West. And I didn't discover the fact that she had died until I came here to visit my mother's grave. There's another stone here of interest. Henry Renty was a classmate of my sister Anne. And as you can see, Anne and Henry were both born in 1935, and he died in a tragic automobile accident right here on the island. His sister Eleanor is a lady that Mother and I have sponsored in missionary work, Eleanor Renty. So you see a lot of families in this cemetery with which we have memories, including the Laidlaw family, which are down over the hill there, and the Ellis family, which we talked about earlier, and a number of the Kama'aina plantation families are buried over on the other side. The town of Lauai housed the workers for the Lauai Cannery. This was one of two pineapple canneries on the island, and there were several hundred people that worked here. I was employed for 2 months in the summer of 1950, and the pay of $1.10 an hour was fantastic. I actually had the easiest job in the cannery, and it probably came as a result of my mother's clout. I tested the juice. I worked in the little lab, and I was the juice tester of the syrup that was put into the cans of pineapple and pineapple juice, and I tested it for different acidity and other measurements. So it was an easy job compared to working on the line or any of the other jobs, but it paid good money, and I had the noon to 8 o'clock at night shift. The other thing you should know about the town of Lawai is that this is the site of the first, what we would call daughter Sunday school that my parents started in early 1942. And what had happened, actually the Sunday school is up in that jungle there. There's a road that no longer exists, but it was the site of the Buddhist language school. Children of second-generation Japanese immigrants, their parents would have them study the Japanese language, just as other immigrants want to retain the culture. But when the war broke out, the army dictated that all Japanese language schools should cease. And so that facility up there became available, and my folks, knowing that there was no work here in Lawai, started a Sunday school with probably, I'm guessing up to 100 children. And many of those kids turned out to be my playmates in high school and our youth group. Several of them are pastors today, so it had a lasting ministry to the young people of Lawai. So Lawai has a great memory for us. We're looking at Hanapepe Valley. This is land owned by the Robinson family, and across the canyon you can see sugarcane growing. This is the only plantation left on Kauai that has commercial sugar. And the reason we're looking up the valley is that about 6 miles up the valley is the famous Hanapepe Falls. And when I was a boy, it was considered a 12-mile hike to earn your second-class Boy Scout badge. Well, I happened to have measles at the time I was going to take that hike and never got it done. But there's a beautiful waterfall at the end of that 6-mile hike, and during World War II, the military would go up there and use it as a training site, and then they would swim in the big pool. Now you can see it by helicopter only because it's on private land. We're in the town of Hanapepe, which is halfway between Koloa and Waimea. In September of 1941, within a matter of maybe 10 days of our having arrived on the island, a DC-3 belonging to Hawaiian Airlines crashed in this grove of trees behind us. And it came down nose first. It had only 2 people in it, the pilot and the co-pilot. And the pilot was doing a familiarization test run with the co-pilot, and they were doing some acrobatics which they weren't supposed to do, and lost control of this plane, and it came down nose first, landed in this grove of trees, and both men walked out unhurt. But the plane sat there for some period of time, and people from all over the island came to see it, as did we. And I remember as a 9-year-old boy looking at, amazed at this DC-3 airplane sticking nose down into these mango trees. We didn't know then what the story was, and it wasn't until years later that the airline confessed that these 2 guys had been goofing off, you might say. They pulled the plane out and salvaged it. So that's the story of this stop. The Hanapepe Swinging Bridge is a pedestrian bridge. It and its predecessors have been here probably for 70 or more years. This is a very sturdy version. Some of the earlier ones were beaten out during the 2 hurricanes, but it's now, if not hurricane proof, at least will withstand much higher winds. But it's a funky little bridge that people enjoy walking across. We're on the site of Olokeli Plantation, and this in earlier days was considered the premier street on the island of Kauai. You can see these beautiful monkey pods. This road was not beat up as it is now. You had the street lights at night, which probably was the only place on the island where you had electric street lights like this. And these cottages were immaculately maintained, and they housed the middle level plantation executives. The plantation manager's home was up behind us, up in the cane fields, and it was actually Gordon Baldwin, our Mrs. Baldwin's husband, that was the manager of the plantation here. But today these are all privately owned by persons to whom they were sold. And we have at the end of this street, we have the only working sugar mill on the island, and we're going to go down and take a look at it. Captain James Cook, his first landing in the Hawaiian Islands, which he called the Sandwich Islands for the Earl of Sandwich, was right here at the mouth of the Waimea River in roughly 1776. And we have a line drawing lithograph, which Scott has given us in our living room, which was drawn by the official cartographer on the Cook voyage. And the scene is that which we see behind us, with the chain of mountains and the mouth of the river. It isn't obviously quite the same 200 and some years later, but this is the view and the place.
All of the time be the tropical time when he do the hula hula dance. I fell in love with the turtle dove, a living this bonny bonny dance.
We're looking at the way in the distance is the Robinson-owned island of Ni'ihau, which is populated by a few hundred native Hawaiians, and you have to have Robinson permission to go to that island. And the people are not forced to stay, so a number of the young people migrate to Kauai or get married and come over here. But it was bought by the Robinsons in the roughly 1850s. They attempted cattle ranching and other types of agriculture. There's quite a history to it, but it's very private. It's best known for the spot where a Japanese, I'm not sure if it was a fighter plane or a fighter bomber, crashed on December 7th, and the pilot terrorized the natives who did not know anything about Pearl Harbor. They had no radios, and he was finally overcome and killed by a couple of burly Hawaiians after he actually shot a couple of them. And they beat his skull in. There's a big long story. It was in the Reader's Digest, and we have a book on the whole incident in our library. That's Ni'ihau. Well, we're looking at the Opalaka Falls and the Ridge Trail coming all the way down on the ridge line. It drops down to where the falls are, and then it goes up the other side over to Kumuela Lookout, which is over beyond that ridge of hills. That water actually comes out of a flume which flows down to irrigate the sugarcane fields, but there aren't any more sugarcane fields, so they've let the water come down through the falls and provide a nice sightseeing vista. Sometime probably in 1945, our Koloa Boy Scout Troop number 12, led by Jack McCluskey, came up here for a weekend camp out in this area behind us. And we did hiking and cooking and sleeping in our sleeping bags and tents. It was a very good fun weekend. Kalalau Valley was closed to civilians during World War II, but when it opened up in '45, we got up here. We'd been on the island for 5 years and never seen this view. And at that time, one of the great trails on the island was open, and it went along this ridge line all the way to the end. And there were 6 of us that took this hike, probably 1946. And we got to the end of the trail with sheer drops, thousands of feet on both sides, as you can see, and about 40 yards ahead of us were a herd of goats. That was as close in all the years that we've been up here that I've ever gotten to a herd of wild goats. And they just stood there and looked at us, and we looked at them, and they disappeared over the edge of the embankment and were gone. But that trail, obviously the authorities deemed it too dangerous because there were no guardrails and it was sheer drops on both sides. I've often wanted to go down and do it again, but they've got a sign here warning you about it. Australia, I think, tried to descend into the valley from the top. It has not been done in modern times, but he thought he could do it. And so wearing just sandals, he descended from somewhere over to the right of us and has never been seen since. His family from the mainland has come and they've attempted to find him or his remains, but he obviously slipped and fell. In ancient times, there was a trail down one of the ridge lines where you could get to the bottom, but it obviously has long disappeared. You can see why it would be very difficult. Mother and I have been in the valley. I landed by helicopter, and she and I came along the coastline by raft. It was fun to see it both from the bottom and the top. This phone booth has a memory that I don't care to recall, but I'll tell the story. In July of 2000, our high school held its 50th reunion on Kauai, and I flew in from Chicago to join my classmates. And I was a guest that weekend in the beach cottage of Peter Deese, my boyhood playmate. And the Deese Waterhouse families own a lovely year-round cottage here in Kokay, and Peter said, why don't you drive up and we'll spend the night in Kokay. And I thought, and still think, that he meant I should drive up on, I think it would have been Friday night, but whatever. And I thought about it. It meant that I would have to leave the banquet probably early in order to get up here. And so at 8 o'clock, around 8 o'clock at night, I excused myself from our 50th anniversary banquet, got in my rental car. It was pitch dark, and on top of that it was raining, and I drove all the way from Waialua on the other side of the island all the way up here to Kokay, through the woods about 2.5 miles back into the jungle, and got to the Waterhouse cabin, and there was nobody there. it was locked up tighter in the drum. Well, I came back down here to this phone booth and I called the Nakatsukas and I said, I'm stranded, can I spend the night with you? I've been abandoned, so to speak, and they said, of course. So I drove all the way back to Koloa, got in about 10:30 or so at night, and never told Peter what had happened. And he probably thought, I get the impression that he thought it was Saturday night, not Friday night. But we've never discussed it and I've never brought it up. This was the cottage that my parents bought in 1942 and owned until my mother sold it probably in 1947. And we would come up maybe at Easter time and start clearing this yard, which over the winter had grown to maybe 2.5 feet high of this grass you see. We'd have to cut it by hand with hand sickles, and it would take several days before it could be mowed. And then we'd come up in the summertime and spend weeks at a time up here. It was very lovely. And we could sleep, well, there are, I think, only 2 bedrooms, so we must have had sleeping bags or something. There's a great big stone fireplace and a kitchen table that you could all, long table you could all sit around. We'd play Monopoly. And many games here. My dad, we have pictures that show my dad having built a swing, big swing in one of these trees. Along the line here, I don't see it now, but there were a line of plum trees. And they were loaded with plums at season time, and you'd almost have to guard these trees because people who didn't belong here would come up here and pick them before you could get them. So picking plums was a seasonal thing. One of the little stories that my sister likes to tell, there was a lady called Miss Larange, and she lived down at the Knudsen house, and she wore a little 6-shooter. We call her Pistol Packin' Mama. And when she would come up the road to visit, somebody in the house would say, "Here comes Miss Larange," and my dad would duck out the back door and go up into the woods and hide until Miss Larange left, and she knew that he was out there hiding somewhere. "Where's Howard?" she'd say. So that's always been his family joke about Miss Larange. We're looking at Waipio Falls, which only since the sugarcane industry has gone out do you see water coming down, because it is released from the flumes that were built by the plantation owners to irrigate their sugar fields. And with the sugar out of business, those flumes are now open, and so the mountain water is free to follow its natural course. Above these falls there are 2 pools, which aren't swimming pools, but you can splash around in them. They're mountain water cold and very invigorating. Well, we're looking at Breneke's Beach, which at one time had the reputation of the best body surfing beach on the island. And in my teenage days, the beach portion was probably 4 or 5 times the size of that you see now. And the sand went out probably another 40 yards at times, so it was a gorgeous, wide sand beach with big rolling waves. There was no surfboarding, it was all body surfing on this beach. And we're standing at the location of where Catherine Baldwin and her husband Gordon raised their 2 daughters, who by the time they lived here were high school age, probably away at Punahou. But Scott and I stayed with Catherine Baldwin in 1980 when we returned from China. She had a sprawling beach house, 1 story, in which she lived alone. And when Hurricane Iniki hit in 1992, it swept all the homes on this side of the island pretty much off their moorings. And her house was crumpled practically into kindling, including all the possessions inside. It was a very difficult period for Catherine. She subsequently moved to Honolulu in a retirement center. But we had an enjoyable time as her guest. She was a very formal lady. Might even have reminded you a bit like Graham. Catherine Baldwin was an amateur painter. She loved to do seascapes, and she'd give her paintings away. She gave her friend Gertrude Smith probably 5 of her oil paintings, and we still have 3 of them. We've given 1 or 2 back to Peter Deese, who was a good friend of the Baldwin family. And Anne has 1 or 2 of them as well. I'm guessing that the incident that I'm talking about happened in 1949 when Esther Williams came to Kauai to make a movie. It probably still is available in video stores. And one day I was swimming after school here all alone. It was a weekday, and I was out in the water, probably about 30 yards out there. The waves were maybe like they were today, maybe a little bigger. And a car pulled up there on the side, parked right up there on the side of the road, and these 2 ladies got out. They had a driver, 2 Caucasian ladies, and they came in and got in the water. They were young, attractive. I couldn't see too closely until one of them waded in probably up to her, maybe her waist, and tried to catch a wave and got tumbled. And they quickly left, but I recognized that it was Esther Williams. And the waves were not to their liking. They did not stay, and I just kind of laughed as a teenager because they were unaware that these waves could be tricky.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So that was my only experience with the Hollywood scene on Kauai.
Famous now.
This is a little casual interview between my Koloa colleague David Iha and myself, and I said at one time, and I may not be totally accurate, but I believed it at the time, that he and I were the only people on earth that had gone to the same 3 schools, graduates of Koloa Elementary, Kaua High School, and Wheaton College. Now, it could possibly be that Craig Nakatsuka has joined this happy band, but nonetheless, there are very few of this august body. I went to the 3 institutions, probably 6-7 years ahead of Dave, but we've been friends since he and Charlie and his brother Russell and his roommate Charlie, whose brother Russell and Leroy also came to Wheaton. One of the things that has bonded us, you might say, more than one thing, but is the fact that Dave's mother attended the Koloa Missionary Church. Now, was she I don't know if your mom was in my mother's Sunday school class or, what the relationship was there. Do you recall, Dave?
Well, when I left Kauai High School to attend Wheaton, my mother wasn't a Christian. So when I was away, at the college, I think during my freshman year, one of my mother's friends wrote a letter explaining to me that my mother became a Christian. So I think she participated regularly in the service. She didn't understand that much of English, but I think the women at Koloa Missionary Church really
took her under their wing, right?
Yeah.
That was my impression. Now, the other outstanding incident, which I want Dave to reflect on, is the visit to Hawaii by the president of the college, V. Raymond Edmond. He came to Kauai, as I recall.
Right. Yeah. Prexy came to Kauai to do the installation sermon or service for Chet Terpstra, who was a Wheaton graduate who spent some time in the Marshall Islands as a missionary, and then came to Kauai to serve as pastor of one of the United Church of Christ, Waimea United Church of Christ, and Prexy came and did the installation service. And while here, the pastor of Koloa Missionary Church, Reverend Don Rose, took Prexy down this old dirt road full of ruts. Don Rose was on Kauai just a couple of weeks ago, and he told me my parents kind of filled up the ruts.
Yeah.
Is
that right?
And then to make the road a little bit smooth into this old plantation-owned home.
Not where your mom lives now, though.
No, it was a home that was owned by the plantation and made available to the workers.
Right.
Corrugated roof iron.
Oh, yeah.
Outdoor toilet,
Sure.
outhouses. And one of the funniest incidents was that Reverend Don Rose briefed Prexy that one of the Asian customs was to remove your shoes before you enter the home. And I think someone had told my parents that, to make the person feel comfortable, they should wear their shoes in the home.
That is so funny.
So when they met in the living room, they said my parents had their shoes on and Prexy had his shoes on.
That is beautiful. Well, that was typical of Mrs. Iha. I had visited her almost every time I came to Kauai. We would go, and most of the time Dave's sister Sumiko would be there and help interpret for the two of us, get us through the language barriers. But it was a beautiful time. Lilian and I enjoyed those visits immensely, and we were there just a year or so before did she make 100? Did she get to 100?
She was 3 months short of
3 months short of 100. Well, she celebrated in the right place. So, you or Dave, where did you fit in the Iha family line?
I was the youngest of 9 children.
No kidding, the youngest, huh?
Youngest of 9.
Wow. So, I would assume, per the custom, you had help from some of the family to get through?
That's right. When I went to Wheaton, I'm not really, even to this day, not sure how we financed my education, except I would write home to my parents. And I think my sisters, especially Sumiko, I think helped finance my college education.
She was teaching, right?
She was teaching.
Sure.
Similarly, when I was in high school and we worked in the sugar plantation or the pineapple fields, we took our summer earnings and gave it to my parents, so they could support our sisters who were at Taylor University.
Yes, that's right. One of the things that Dave told me once was that our cousin, John, Butch as we called him, was a Luna. One summer, I guess, when he was in college or whatever. His folks were pastor at the UCC Church in Hanapepe, right. So,
I might add that I owe a debt of gratitude to Ray's mother as a Wheaton grad. When I was in high school and applying to colleges, she told me to apply to Wheaton. One of my sisters came back from Taylor and said, "Oh, I should apply to Wheaton." And of course, Ray's mother was a classmate of Enoch Dernis, who was the admissions officer and registrar. So I'm sure she put in a good word for me.
And I had the same clout too, Dave. In fact, Enoch had his son meet me down at the train station. And I didn't own, we came with virtually nothing. I came with no suit, one pair of shoes, and a couple of velour shirts and maybe a pair of khaki trousers, and that was pretty much it. And I know that Dave didn't bring too much more than that with him as well. But the other tie we had was with the football team. And of course, Dave had a distinguished record here at my alma mater playing for the Red Raiders. Did you guys win all 4 years you were here?
As I recall, we had we won the championship
probably
all 4
every
years.
year. And so worked his way up to a senior year. Was that the undefeated season? Senior year?
No, I think we got defeated, but we still won the championship.
No, I mean at Wheaton.
At Wheaton. In my senior year, we were
senior year, unbeaten, with some incredible games, which we won't go into, but the one that really, as Dave has told the story, was the DeKalb game. If we hadn't won that, it wouldn't have been unbeaten.
And we won only 7-2.
7-2 in the rain on a what we might call a Hail Mary pass. Now the guy, I've tried to get the guy that caught that
Kent Hutchison
to respond to me. He's in Seattle, in Bellingham.
Well, I think that's his brother. Neil is in Bellingham.
Neil is in Bellingham. So Kent was the one that caught it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's in Colorado.
Maybe.
I tried to get him to tell his version of that story, but now that I know, maybe that's why Neil hasn't answered, because it wasn't Neil that caught it. It was Kent. All right, well, we'll get that one straight, because I wanted to get the whole story of that particular game. I've talked to Bubba about it. And Bubba says, we didn't see that. We couldn't even see the throw. That's funny. Well, anyway, we've had some great times. And that there are a lot of other stories we could tell, but I felt that we ought to have a little bit of this vignette. Dave is, I was here by chance, right here in this hotel for his retirement from Kauai Community College, and had the honor of bringing greetings from the college at this affair where there were probably upwards of 300 or 400 people from all over the island. So it was a wonderful evening, and he's now and I've offered, he hasn't taken me up yet, if he runs for mayor, I will come and be his campaign manager. The Koloa Mafia. Well, anyway, we've had a great time. We love the Ihas and hope they come to visit us again in Wheaton soon. Scott, we appreciate I have a little presentation here while we get this on tape. This is a signed and autographed baseball from Coach Lee Fund. And what makes it distinctive is he's put his Brooklyn Dodgers signature on it and inscribed it for David. And I had him put Ebbets Field because Lee is one of the surviving Brooklyn Dodgers who actually played in Ebbets Field. So we want you to have that as a memento from Coach Fund, and hope that I'll go next to your Frank Sullivan ball, which I have now, thanks to you.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. That's a great reminder of Coach.
You bet.
February 10th, Granddaddy Smith's birthday.
We are here in the old Japanese Buddhist cemetery in Koloa. And there's a story here. This young man, Larry Moranaka, was in the youth group at the Koloa Union Church. His parents were Buddhist, but he attended the Protestant church. And he was the first American of Japanese ancestry to be killed, to die, I should say, from this island during World War II. And he died in a vehicle accident during training on Oahu and was brought back here in the summer of 1942 to be interred. And because he had attended the youth group at our church, my father was asked to perform the interment ceremony right on this spot. And Larry became the first Christian to be buried in this Buddhist cemetery. I have the clipping from the Garden Island dated at the time of his death and burial when Dad performed the interment ceremony. It was quite an affair with the military honors and old Japanese couples crowded around here. And of course the supreme irony is that 50 years later, the man that performed his burial here is also buried in the same cemetery, which we're going to go up to now. The reason, of course, Howard Smith died in West Palm Beach, Florida, but Ann and I felt, perhaps nostalgically, that because this was his last pastorate, and only real pastorate as such, and that he really loved his years on Kauai, that it might be meaningful for him to be interred at the site of his only pastorate. So the kindness of Hisashi Nakatsuka, Hisashi and his friend Mr. Okamura, they created the site here, and they poured the concrete, and they planted the monument that we had ordered and bought in Honolulu and had shipped over here. And so it was a year or two after Dad died that we had our first chance to visit his grave. As far as I know, except for family, the other foursome that visited here was his best friend Dick Shatty from West Palm. They made a trip to Hawaii. They came to Kauai almost especially to visit Howard's grave, and it took them a half a day to find the cemetery. And you can understand why. There was no sign there. They went to 2 other cemeteries in Koloa, couldn't find any stone, and finally somebody said, why don't you try the old Japanese cemetery, and they finally found it. But they laugh about how long it took them to find the stone, and what did they do? They left a bottle of wine on it. A bottle of Chardonnay or something as a, as their little memorial, if you will. But it's a beautiful spot. The trees have grown up, but normally in the old times you could see the chain of mountains, and we think it's a fitting spot to visit from time to time.
Talk about Hawaii.
In September 1941, we arrived in Koloa. They didn't have any sign at that time announcing our arrival, but we were going to be here for a number of years. The town probably had a population of 2,500 at the time, and proved to be one of the more happy years of our family's life.
This is a hornbill.
I like that.
That one,
And this is scrimshaw, right?
yeah.
And this is all
That's a
inlaid.
bill, yeah, that's inlaid.
And so what kind of bill? What is that?
like the hornbill,
The bird.
bird, yeah.
And they use it for a snuff bottle?
Yeah, because they put a thing on the bottom and they make a little stopper on the top.
So this is is it because somewhere in the family it's kind of become a collection thing for her?
Well, it started, the Becks, Sue's folks, had a few stuff bottles, and really nice ones. And so then we, as we went on our travels, we just started accumulating, And we see one, oh, let's get that
There's
one, oh,
one.
let's get that one.
That's so neat though. He's
These are
showing me your...
Mongolian.
And is that because they were in the family or you guys
No,
put
we
them?
bought them. We bought these, but you can tell that they're so different. They got that metallic and then the embedded. You can look at that. This one here is
That's old.
it's either the oldest or the second oldest ukulele in the state.
You're kidding. So how did you verify that? You had somebody
Yeah.
tell you that?
No. There was they had a contest and you had to provide documentation and all that, and so we did. And it's got the name of the maker. So they came from Portugal. And so.
That's beautiful.
And then this one, this other one here, is another really old one, and I bought that for $25.
At the flea market or something?
No,
Where?
in college.
You're kidding. With the case?
Yep. And
great.
what happened was this classmate of mine, his mother was here in Hawaii, and she was Italian, and I guess she had a boyfriend or some such thing, and she had this ukulele, and it's a really old one because it's got inside it's got the name of the who made it, the newness.
The manufacturer, yeah.
And it was made by the guy, right?
Right.
And so she took it to Italy, and then the war broke out, and she kept it in Italy. And after the war and all that, she gave it to him, and he brought it to college in California.
Right.
And then he ran out of money, and so he says, "Oh, you want? I need $25." And I said, "Yeah. Well, what do you got?" He said, "Oh, this ukulele." I said, "Holy mackerel!" Ooh. So
And you try not to act too excited.
here's the $25.
With the case.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. Absolutely beautiful
Yeah.
though, all the little,
Oh.
I mean, gorgeous because it's handmade. What is that? That looks like a scary weapon.
No, it's a let me see if this thing.
With the hook.
Well, yeah, what it is. Let's just see the ukulele first. I mean, this is
Oh, you're gonna let me touch
this
it?
is a really work of art. You see?
Wait,
the-
was the music book in there?
Yeah.
Oh my
Do you see see how the back?
Look at how
it's like a violin.
Oh, it's
You know,
gorgeous.
it's kind of got a curve on it.
Look at this. Oh, these are beautiful.
And then they inlaid all the wood around here.
Absolutely. And so some great little shop maker made it, huh?
Yeah.
Look at that.
No, I mean this guy was a master from
Fascinating.
Portugal.
Oh, so he was known for making. Did he only make ukuleles or did he make violins as well?
I don't know.
Because the way that feels on the back
I know.
feels just like a violin.
Yeah, but he came to Hawaii as an immigrant, and then he he just got whatever kind of jobs you can get. But on the side, he started making ukulele, and so.
It's beautiful. Wow. Oh, look at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
And you never keep it tuned
And why is that?
because it bend it.
Okay. So you just make
The,
sure
the strings.
it should be loose.
Yeah, when you're not using.
Do you ever
it.
play these?
Yeah.
You're
And
great.
this is the oldest.
And so what year do you think this is from? Oh, what does that say?
Hui Heilani.
Oh my god. Look at that.
See all the inlay.
Over and over and over.
Yeah.
So
I
you
mean, each one is a little
teeny tiny piece. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
work with tweezers to do that. So you do play. Oh, look at this. You have to hold that up for Scott to put on the film. Look how beautiful that is. So you do play these. You're great.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
I can show you other ones that I got.
You are the collector.
Martin guitars? Have you
Yes,
ever-
I do know Martin guitars. My son plays acoustic guitar.
I have a.
He's a
I have a-
Takamine.
I have a guitar. It's away, not down here, made by Mr. Martin
Really? Wow, that's
from my grandmother.
and it was hers.
Yeah, and it was in a case. They called it a coffin, and it's a wooden case, and it goes dum 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 dum. You know.
Not yeah, because of the way it's shaped.
Yeah, it looks like a coffin.
And you got that from her.
Yep.
That's so great.
Well, this thing you were asking.
Yes. What is that?
This
Frightening.
is what it is. The cowrie shell. It attracts squid.
Oh, I never knew that. I have one of those that I found.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so what the Hawaiians did is this is a rock under the bottom, and then they made a rope and they tied it all together with a thing, and then they put a hook on it, and so you lower it down to where you think there's squid, and then the squid come and go to attack the cowrie because they attack the cowrie and break it open and
Right, to eat the meat, right.
So you put down there, oh, you feel the thing, and you pull it up and you catch the squid, then you bring it up and put it in the boat.
So that's how old? From
Gotta be. This one is probably about 1800.
wow.
But they're older ones
Right.
than this.
And so did you just find that floating in the water somewhere?
No,
Somebody
no,
gave it to
no,
you?
no, we collected, and then this is a fish hook,
Oh my gosh. They catch a
See?
good fish.
and you know you bound this on, and then it used to have more of a tail on it, so when you troll with it,
So that's like an animal claw or something, right? What is that? Or shell? What
it's
is
a
that?
shell.
Okay, and they just
And then
sharpened it.
and what you do is you tie the two together. You got holes that way, and then you tie it, and then so it's a lure. So you tow it like this,
And then just catch.
and the fish grab it.
And it's all over.
Yeah,
Sayonara.
yeah. This is the old fish hook.
That one I got.
Wood?
Yeah.
It's out of wood.
That's wow. That's for when you're out for big fish, though.
No, they got big ones.
Really?
Yeah, big ones than that.
And then your gourds, and those are used. They have like little net things on them. So is
Yeah,
that for
to carry.
music or for
To
carry?
carry, so you can carry them around. Yeah, like this implement, you use it. Okay, when you're making rope, they had vines certain vines that. Let's see, do I have it out here? Yeah, here. That,
Yes, the twine.
okay,
Uh huh.
It's really tough twine, and it's a tree, and you strip the bark off, and then you use this, and you make it into long.
Long pieces, so
Pieces.
then it can be. That's
Yeah,
braided.
and then you
isn't
braid
it?
it. Then you braid
Wow.
it, and it's really tough.
It looks like it.
Yeah, really tough. And that cordage, when the English ships were coming around the world and they stopped in Hawaii, they always wanted that cordage.
Because it was so strong.
They'd use it the Hawaiians used it for their canoes.
Wow.
You know, to lash the canoes to, you know, for the sails and
right.
you know, and it, you can put it in salt water and it doesn't disintegrate. So,
Wow. That's very cool. So like they can do their sailor knots and stuff.
yeah,
out of it.
it's called olana.
The next time we come out, I'll have to bring you this macrame purse. It was my great grandmother's that a sailor made for her. That's out of this really thick yarn.
Can you guess what this is?
It looks like some kind of a scooper. So is it something? A hockey stick.
No,
I don't know.
it's when I won't say wife, but when your woman is not home
Boom.
and you need a back rub. No.
Seriously, no, it's
No,
not.
yes it is. No, if you held it, right? And see how
Scratch, yeah.
No, it
Oh, it
molds.
does the knots.
It
yeah.
molds to your back.
That's very cool.
And you know, Oh, she's not here. That's okay. I gotta take care of myself.
There you go.
Oh, try it on yourself. Right. No.
Okay, but it's, oh, I see, yeah, because it does the knots in your back.
Right.
You are so funny.
No.
You're sure that's
Yes. Yes. It is.
That's too funny.
There's another one there. But they're different, you know.
Because people are shaped different,
Yeah.
right? And your conch shell that I'm sure you blow
Oh,
every
yeah.
night at
Yeah,
sundown,
right.
right?
Yeah. There's another one here.
Oh, that one's beautiful.
Yeah.
So are conch shells found in the waters around here? They are? Oh, I'd love to find one. It'd be so fun.
Yeah. In fact, I have.
Just when you're out walking
No.
at the beach, you have to dive for those,
You gotta
right?
dive. You
That's
gotta
what I
dive
thought.
for it. Yeah. This is a pig god.
I know, you can see.
Yeah.
I got a book on her when we were here last time. She's amazing, Emma. So we were just at Grove Farm,
Yeah.
and she had all her things like this, just and all cataloged. And I said, "Where'd she get all of them? Did your dad just find these, or did people give them to him, or?"
Yeah. Like this. Okay. This is a typical. I mean, it's a branch, right?
Right.
So it's the strongest part is right here. Because
Right.
It's a branch, right? And so what the Hawaiians did is they found these or got these, and then you get a.
So what is this rock? Is it slate or is it what
Oh
is
no! This is
it?
very,
Oh, it looks
very.
like obsidian.
See how heavy it is.
Oh my gosh.
And there are only a few places that you find this heart. And what you do is see how it,
Yes, and then you do your twine.
and then you have the ads
Wow.
to make, you know.
That's very cool.
And because this is very, it's
Right.
very tough
And
because
the
it's a
knot.
branch.
Right.
It doesn't break. It might break down here, but
Right,
it won't break
not up in
not
here.
up in here.
So it's your tool for digging or hitting or whatever you needed it for.
They'll make canoes,
Oh, this was for making. Oh.
you know,
Would that be sharp enough though to do the
you
work?
can.
Really?
Yeah. Well, these are
Wow. Okay. And then the smaller ones, like a chisel.
Yep.
And I can see that. Yeah.
You know, it depends on the, you get different size of these. When you get different size of those, and,
Right.
you know, it's
Just like-
for small work,
Right.
you know, you're gonna hollow the big thing. But actually, for the big canoes, what they did is they would hollow out a little bit, just a little bit, and then put fire. They'd
Oh,
put,
and burn it out
no, they'd start to burn it, and as it burned, then they get the ads and go.
because it's softer.
easier,
Right.
right?
Smart.
So you don't have to go.
And sit there and
Correct.
do that forever, right? So, and then for grinding, right? The stones, grinding stones.
No, those were lamps.
Oh, so what would they put in them to burn?
Out in my
Oil?
driveway is a kukui nut tree.
Okay, I was gonna say
And
not oil.
There's a camel nut.
Okay,
Camel nut.
I heard that the other day,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
burn the oil when we went to the botanical gardens, right?
Yeah, we have a tree out there, and I roast them because we eat the nut
Mm-hmm.
too. As a condiment.
But when they would use them for light, would they cut them or would they? What
No,
would they do?
put them on a string. Put maybe
Just
a
like a
stick,
candle.
like a stick. Yeah, and line them up.
Uh-huh.
And light the top.
How beautiful that must be. Very cool.
You know, this one, when it's got a little hole in the bottom, it's a lamp.
Okay. It's good you know that.
And then these kind of things are weapons.
Ooh.
So you
Yeah.
put, my hand won't fit in here, but
Yeah.
you know, you could put your hand like that,
Yeah.
and you know, you're gonna fight somebody, you can go, or
Okay.
slash,
He
right?
scared me. Wow.
These are
What
shark
is shark teeth?
Shark's
Oh my god. You just ripped somebody to shreds.
You do.
Oh my god. Ferocious
And then
times.
this is another one.
Same thing, you could just have
Yeah,
it, you
you-
could have it in your hand and you just,
Yeah,
or hold it next to you.
yeah,
Early switchblades.
yeah. And then this one is the bone, and
Ooh.
you put it on, and you hide it on the inside of your, you know, here. So
Is that a shark's tooth too? Oh,
No, this is
what is that?
it's a bone.
Oh my
With,
god.
you know, you put it
So
on.
how old is that? How long ago would that be from?
This one is probably 1600.
So did your dad did somebody in the family find this stuff, pass it down, or it was just passed down, passed down?
Passed down, passed down.
Okay.
But my dad, that was one of his.
He liked to
kept
collect
collecting,
things like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Very neat.
And this is a god also.
Is it?
Yeah.
You gonna tell me what this is god of?
Yeah. Fertility.
I figured. It kind of had that look to me. Wait, where's the wine? Are you showing your parents this part? That's hysterical.
No, it was very important.
I believe it.
No.
I'm a believer.
In agriculture, mainly.
So-
in every place you had a big agriculture thing, there was a lot of them, you know.
That's great. You're so funny. So, and the bench, is this a bench or is this for
No, this
grind?
this board, it didn't have legs
Okay.
originally, and it's for you can make poi, you can put the taro plant and make
There's a really big one of these over at the Hyatt on Kauai.
yeah, but you didn't.
they weren't.
It's kind of show,
Yeah.
but this is about the size you.
This is a real working.
Yeah, you're only one person. I mean, you're not gonna have 25 people.
Right.
You know, piling taro. You're
Right.
gonna have one. So this, and my dad got it, and then he said, "Oh, we'll make a table," and he put
I love
he
it.
put the legs.
Very cool though. This is neat.
That's Maori.
Wow.
This one,
And what's Maori?
Maori. It's our Polynesian cousins in New Zealand.
Okay.
I mean,
They're
they're Hawaiians. I
Right.
mean, they're
the beginning peoples, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I went to New Zealand, the words are the same. Like manu for them is bird, bird for us. I mean,
So is their alphabet the same then too?
yes, it is, but they pronounce things differently. They have an F in their language, like they say whangare. Here we say hanale.
Right. H
But
instead of F.
it's the FG
Still that
is the
phonic
H
sound
here.
is there.
Yeah, the whole thing. And so you could have a Hawaiian, and I've been on trips where, in fact, Uncle Saul Bright went down there and made speeches in Hawaiian, and they understood.
Wow. That's so great though. But see, it's just that whole connection. They're
Yeah.
all connected, right?
And this is
beautiful.
a high talking chiefs. They have this that when the high talking chief has this, and he's going to speak, everybody shuts up, right? And Sir John Grace, who was a Maori and he got knighted by the Queen of England, was a friend of my dad's.
Wow.
So one of his trips, he came up here and he presented this to my dad.
Wow.
And this is, it's really, it was a artifact within his family. It was just not, it was not made for my dad. It was,
Right.
you know, this
My God.
ukulele over here is one of my
It's
favorites.
bigger than the other ones, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it's a special one. It's out of tune.
Just
But
So why
it's
does some have
it's eight, it's
Four
an eight string
instead of 8.
because
instead
it's
of
a double.
six.
See, each string like
The one I bought
It-
Kai is
it-
only 4-string, by the way. I bought our granddaughter a 4-string.
it's really out of tune. So you gotta
Play with it.
you gotta tune. I mean, a sound that's there's a.
Is this your regular one you play when you're not playing with Doug?
This is the one I like to play.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to play this
This
one,
one, yeah.
the most.
It
but
fits you.
but I don't travel with it.
No.
I have another one. Oh, see? Let's see.
I'm looking at those guys back there.
That is King Kalakaua.
Oh my goodness.
And he is visiting our family ranch. And these are my grand-uncles.
Oh my goodness.
And they're, you know, he came up and they're just having a good time and having a funny
fun.
photograph.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey Scott, you told us the story about the flag. Your great-grandfather or grandfather?
No, my great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother helped design the flag,
Yeah.
is that right?
Mhm.
We were talking about that the other day. We couldn't, Scott and I couldn't remember the whole story.
Yeah.
For powder? What is that?
It's a flask.
That's, for the alcohol. Oh, what am I thinking? I thought it was free. I can cook. What does that say? I pity what?
My dad.
What?
This is my dad's book.
His English book? What does that
This
say?
is-
Read that.
I can't read it, but it says, I pity the baker, I pity the cook, I pity the guy who steals his book.
Oh no. Brother.
Gee, man.
That's great. Was this his book from school?
Yep.
Look at that.
Oh, brother.
That's great. And he's got stuff. What is this? Rickety, rickety,
Junior,
rickety.
Yeah.
We are not allowed to cuss, but nevertheless, we will confess there's nothing the matter with us. Rickshaw, rickshaw, rickshaw band. We belong to the, does that say the hash? House gang.
Yeah.
The
First
Hash
in
House
war,
Gang, which is-
last in peace, always in the hands of the chief of police. Dad had humor. That's great. And he probably had to pay for that book afterwards. That's funny. So when you can play with 4 strings, 6 strings, 8 strings, it's just how much more music you get out of it, right?
Yeah. You gotta learn with the 4.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
you learn with the 4, and then once you're competent with the 4, and you want more tones, then you know.
Very cool.
So this thing.
So you always travel with your ukulele?
Oh yeah, it goes all. You know, gotta have music after all.
Absolutely.
Okay, my fondest memories of Aunt Gert's driving was, well, the first story I ever heard, and have you told this one to the camera about your mother driving into the peanut field in Kukakai?
No.
Okay, this is the first one, and this one I was a baby, so this is stories I've heard. My father loved to tell the story because apparently when they were in Kukakai, my folks were down in a little house on the bay, Kaneohe Bay.
On stilts.
And you folks lived up the hill.
We were up the hill.
And so Uncle Howard was teaching Aunt Gert how to drive. So I guess he would give her driving lessons in the evening when there weren't lots of cars on the road. So anyhow, Mom and Dad were sitting in their house, and suddenly they heard this crash, crash, total silence. And then they heard Aunt Gert's laugh.
Oh.
Now, Aunt Gert had a cackle for a laugh, which you could hear for miles. And it was such a distinct laugh. You knew it was your mom. So, they couldn't figure out what had happened. Because then the laugh stopped. Pretty soon they heard cars and that was it. Well, the next morning, they went out and they found out Aunt Gert had come down the hill, across the road, and had flown off the side of the road, and the whole car went flying down and ended up in a peanut field. And boom. And of course, Uncle Howard was just probably having total conniption fits, and Aunt Gert was laughing her head off, and then she started the car and just drove out of the peanut fields. And of course, what my dad said, can you imagine that poor farmer coming the next day, and all he found was tire tracks. And then what about the time she tried to send us over the edge?
Oh, you mean I'm going up to Coquet?
No, the one up at still Kukakai when she put the car out over.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think she was backing up or something, and she got 2 wheels off and all the kids were in the car.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a matter of getting all the kids out of the car. car. So somebody,
Oh,
yeah,
gee.
so
Well, that would have been here. We had the other incident that we remember is the time that Mother was going to surprise Dad, who was in Honolulu, and she drove over the Pali alone and greeted him as he came out of wherever he was, to great consternation that she had driven with a learner's permit over the Pali, which was an incredibly winding
with
highway.
all of these drop-offs, that I mean, you go over and you are gone forever.
And undoubtedly there was a meeting of the minds on that one.
Well, the other story of the Pali, though, is Mom and Dad always talked about the time, I don't know whose car they had, but they were going over at night, and every time you would put your foot on the brake, I don't know if it was your dad or my dad, it blew the light fuse. It was when the lights had fuses. So once you put, the lights would go out. Well, they had a couple of extra fuses and they got through this. Well, what happened was, then they were going to run out of fuses. So they had anchored on one fender, and my mother lying down on the other fender with flashlights to show them both. You know, it's amazing that the two families lived through the Pali and Kokakai. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing.
Well, we all done in dresses too.
That was the car that we called the Green Hornet. You had to tie the back door on with a rope. We have a picture of that car with the kids all sticking their heads out of the window. It was unreal.
Well, Anchor was so funny because years later on Kauai, she had, what was it, a Chevy? The car she had.
Volkswagen?
No, she had a Chevy or something. But anyhow, the speedometer didn't work. Well, she just didn't really think it was really that important part of the car that a speedometer had to be fixed. So she drove without the speedometer, see? And
Butch loves to tell this story.
yeah, because there was one night we saw her just barreling down the road. So we decided so we decided we'd tail her and clock her. Well, she was going like 85 miles an hour and afterward we finally caught, and she said, "No, that can't be true." And I said, "Yes, it was." And she said, "Well, I go by the policemen and they all wave at me." They were saying, "Yeah, they're trying to tell you to stop." And she said, "They just wave at me."
But she also said the car couldn't go that fast.
It did, though. It did. We did clock her.
That's unbelievable.
It was a scary thing. And the other thing was that she would drive in low. She kept her car, and we could hear her from when we lived in Hanapiki.
Yeah.
We could hear her from one time she left the house all the way to the bottom of the hill intersection. You could hear the car. And Dad would say, "Okay, Gert, shift." "Okay, Gert, shift." And finally she'd get down to the main road, and then she'd go on her way. But driving was not a really fine art as far as the Ekvall sisters were concerned. I mean, my mother was a scary, scary, scary person behind the wheel also. So,
Did your mom learn here?
my mom learned when she was almost 50, 40, 48, 49. And the reason she had to learn to drive was when they moved to Big Island in 1960. She never drove up to that time. And in 1960, she got a job as a kindergarten teacher out in the country. And she had to drive. So Dad taught her how to drive, and she passed 2 times. Took her to get through, but she finally got her license. And so she was the kids always thought it was an adventure to drive with Grandma. It was a scary adventure, but it was an adventure.
She was a fast driver.
Oh God. And, no, it was an amazing thing. But those two, they had such fun together, and there were many years difference in age. Your mom was how much older than mine?
About 7.
About 7 years different. So I'm sure as young people, they probably didn't have an awful lot in common. I think because Mom was closer to Henry, and Aunt Gert was kind of the older sister, and then the two were very close. And I don't think it was until, you know, I think really when we came back from the mainland
From
in
here.
1956, that they really became close friends.
Okay.
I think you know, we did things as families together
In the summers
in
here.
the summers, or they came to Eva, and you stayed
It's
in.
more than you come. It was more you coming to Kauai
Yeah.
than us coming. I came, but not that, I don't remember
Well,
my folks.
later, I think probably when you were off
I
from
must have gone
college,
off. Then she would come and do
she
summer
would come
work.
and do summer work, and she'd live in Eva with us.
That's-
And Ann would usually bring a friend over, and so they would
Okay.
spend summers with us. And they were still very compatible, but I wouldn't say they were good friends. But when we came back, and
Hanapepe period.
Hanapepe period with Mom, Dad, and Aunt Gert as a terrible threesome. I mean, they're the kind that would get up, you know, they'd say, let's go shelling. Middle of the night, let's go shelling. You know, let's go to Honolulu and go shelling. It's 10 o'clock at night, let's go shelling. You know, or they would take breakfast out and do breakfast on the beach shelling and that kind of stuff. So they really became very
Those were very good years.
Good years for both of them.
Yeah, good years.
Yeah.
And then when you went to Hilo, when they went to Hilo, Mother would come down for a month.
Yeah, she would stay with them for a month. And she had her own room downstairs, and she was very independent. She had friends.
Then she broke her foot off of a little step about that high from the washroom, right?
Right.
And she didn't mind it at all because she got to stay in Hilo an extra month. Yeah.
But then she came here. They came here, and she was in her wheelchair. And we had her in that back bedroom.
Ah.
And Cully was quite a little boy at that time and spent a lot of time running Aunt Gert up and down the hallway in her wheelchair. And it was quite the vacation. And she wasn't going to come. I don't remember when exactly it was, but Mom and Dad were coming over, and Aunt Gert said, "Oh, no, I can't come. It's too much trouble." But we said, "No, you come too." Well, I mean, she had a good time, but I'll tell you, those kids ran around in that wheelchair like so. But
Yeah.
she was very. I can remember her coming, and she missed your kids. You know, she missed you guys, and so like when Malia was a baby, I have pictures of Malia as about 9 months old. And Aunt Gert just sitting in a rocking chair, just rocking this baby, and Malia just sitting there with Aunt Gert. And I think it was, you know, it was Christmas times, and it was one of the times that you guys weren't here, and she just, you know, she liked having babies around.
Sure.
She just liked having the little kids, and the kids loved Aunt Gert. In fact, Casey and Butch's kids always called her Annie Granny, because they couldn't figure out. They knew I was Annie Sue, so that can't be Aunt Gert because she's so much older. So she was Annie Granny, and that was her nickname for the kids gave her. So yeah, but
Well, then there was a time that was it Butch that spiked the Christmas
oh,
punch?
that was the New Year's punch.
Oh, New Year's.
Yeah, we had. Well, Aunt Gert always had a New Year's Day party. Now we would go. This was over in Kauai.
In the house that we talked about that was
On the-
torn down on the school
On the
yard.
schoolyard in Koloa. And that was Butch and I were in college at the time. So we'd come home for vacation, and we'd have a big party. I mean, we'd go to the yacht club party on New Year's Eve and all this. And then New Year's Day, Aunt Gert would have her party, and she would include all of us. So it would be all of us, all the kids who came from the dorms to come to our house, and then the Wilcox, Casey and Pammy Wilcox and Debbie Wilcox and this whole gang. We'd probably have 30 people at her house, and we'd have dinner, and then we'd play games. You know, we'd have Scrabble. We had a great time, and everybody enjoyed it. Well, she would always have this great big bowl of punch. Well, this is when Tommy Mullins, our friend from Australia, chemistry major who made his own grain alcohol, and he and Butch And a couple other guys, Harold Masamoto and a bunch of them, they were all along and they decided, okay, we're going to spike Aunt Gert's punch bowl. So they did. And Aunt Gert would come out and say, the punch this year is really good. This is a really good. and you know, and Butch is just terrible. You'd go, Aunt Gert, don't you want to?
Oh, no.
Oh yes, this is really good punch. Well, she didn't get tipsy or anything. Well, she probably did, but we didn't go out of the house. She didn't have to drive anywhere. But we had so much. You know, it was so much fun, and everybody we just had a good time.
Yes, you did.
You know, and she'd have her friends from the church, and even our wild kids, and everybody would be together. You know, we'd end up very compatible.
Yes.
Even though it was a very eclectic group that got together.
Right.
But
Oh, it's fun.
yeah, she was. If there was a side of her you guys probably didn't
Never saw.
see.
That's right.
You know, because she was visiting.
Right.
And when she was at our house, it wasn't really visiting. She just was there, kind of thing. And I mean, Scott and Aunt Gert just had a constant at each other because they just did, but they really enjoyed each other's company, and she just accepted, our lifestyle and how she fit into it, and she fit in very well. She really did. She was great fun. And she had good friends. She had good friends.
Oh, those Kauai friends of hers. Jonesy,
and then
Catherine Baldwin.
yeah, and then the ladies she would swim with, and that they would call each other.
The Huddies, Elsie Huddy, and there was a Smith, part Hawaiian gal.
They should swim with every day.
At Lidgate, and
So she didn't lead a lonely life. It was very full. It was full of friends, and it was full of family.
the Larkins.
Everybody in the neighborhood knew her. You know the story of when she had her accident. And she pulled out of the church. Was it the missionary church there in Kapaa?
Yeah.
And she pulled out, and a car crashed into her.
No.
Yeah, and when she had all her teeth knocked out and all
Oh
of
my
that.
goodness, no.
Yeah. She had a terrible accident. She was in the hospital, and she had pulled out of the missionary church.
Yeah.
I think it was like Wednesday Bible study or something.
Yeah.
And she pulled out, and this car, it was a drunk driver, banged into her. Fortunately, it was right in front of the fire station.
Oh.
So the paramedics were right there. They were right there immediately. And and here's Aunt Gert just lying out, just blood on her face, because she really did get her teeth knocked. And but anyhow, and she was unconscious.
Oh my
and this,
goodness! I
and
don't
this
even
guy,
remember this.
the driver of the truck, I think it was a pickup truck that hit her, or the car. Anyhow, it was a Filipino boy, and he gets back and he says, "Oh my God! I killed my kindergarten teacher!" And it was some kid who had been in her kindergarten class in Lihue, and he was tears streaming. The policeman afterwards would tell Mom he had tears streaming down his face because he was sure he had killed his kindergarten teacher.
Isn't that incredible?
But anyhow, she went on, and then don't you remember? That's when she had the false teeth. That's when she had the new teeth made, and it's too bad it didn't happen years ahead.
Huh.
Because Aunt Gert did not have attractive teeth.
No.
But after that accident, they made very attractive teeth, and she had a lovely smile. And I thought, what a shame that this didn't happen to her 20 years ago.
Incredible.
Because she had a lovely smile.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Did you know that story?
I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
No. Well.
Anyhow, and then the end. We had good talks even at the end.
That's right. We were there 3 days.
Yeah, Pammy Wilcox and
Pam did a
Mom and you
wonderful
and me.
job
Yeah.
with the hospital. Well, how about the day that Sue and Scott showed up at our front door barefoot. We couldn't believe it. They had, what, driven across the U.S. or?
Well, we were on our way to Quantico.
I know you were.
That was in 1960, and Scott was a baby.
Who's Scott?
Yeah.
That Scott was a baby.
Right.
And we drove all that out of our way to get to your house
We
to
did.
have a visit.
Yeah.
And
Scott had his butch haircut. He was really in the Marines, right?
oh yeah, he already was
Commissioned.
commissioned officer, so we
Right.
were headed back in to Quantico. And that was the
Yeah.
first time I got to meet you. Was that
That
true?
was a-
Yeah. Yeah.
Barefoot.
What's that?
You were barefoot. He said
Well, we'd been in the car. Yeah, in the car. I probably had shorts and barefoot on. You know, that's how I travel across the country.
I would too.
And then we brought Lillian here in '63,
Yeah.
and we stayed with Casey and Butch in their little house in Enchanted Lakes. Now, where were you living at the time? You were on the mainland?
No, '63 we were home. We lived in Kootenai. We were home in '63. Wendy would have been a baby.
Okay,
I
that's
would
right.
probably have been pregnant with Cully. Yeah, about
Okay.
that time. So they would have had guest rooms, and we probably didn't have guest rooms at that time.
Tiny house, though.
Yeah, that was a little house.
But the last night, we had dinner at the Willows.
Okay.
Butch and Casey and Scott and Sue and Ray and me,
Uh-huh.
just before we got on the plane to return to Chicago.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
nice memory.
that was when it was a nice restaurant. When it was really nice.
We
Yeah.
went back a number of times after that. '84, we took our entire sales crew there for a so-called big dinner. And
But
Well-
another time, another drive that Ray had was the time after you graduated from Wheaton, and you drove out to Rhode Island.
oh, and
To
my
visit-
new
Oh,
the
did you
Chevy,
have?
the Chevy, the '55 Chevy, beautiful automobile. And that was a great visit in Kingston.
Yeah,
We did all kinds of things with Noni and your neighbor.
Noni. In fact, I have to answer an email from Noni right now, but it was good fun.
Butch and I went to Fenway one day. I was trying to think, and you might even remember, we went, our family, your family and I, we went to a farmhouse where they had this corn on the cob. Whose home was that? It was probably 20, 25 minutes away. And they lived on this farm, and they had a huge spread laid out.
And that was there in Kingston?
Oh, yes, I remember vividly. It was quite an
no, I don't
experience.
remember where that
Okay,
would've
well,
been.
I've tried to come up with that
No, couldn't come up with a name there.
name.
So-
But we went to the beach.
The only place he didn't follow us to was he didn't come to Caracas.
That's right.
You visited us almost every place else, but
Oberlin.
you didn't. Did you come to Oberlin?
Oh, 3 times.
Yeah, yeah.
3 times.
That's
over.
right, because I remember Dad taking you down and buying you a
Bobby Riggs tennis racket,
Yep.
which I still have. Signature racket. Yeah.
yeah.
Scott's played with that.
I have.
And we went to Vermilion just to see the old location there.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think that the sad thing and the thing that really I'm sorry about is that, you know, over the years I've had visits with Ann, but Ann hasn't been able to be part of the fun family
Yeah.
things that we did, you know, and that was always kind of too bad. That was I'm sorry that,
yeah,
that she
just
didn't
talked to
have
her
that.
day before yesterday from Kauai. Said we were going to be here, and she wanted to be remembered to everyone, and she appreciates the standing invite to
Yeah.
come. And
But you know, big cousins are important. You know, well, we just kind of, Butch and I always just kind of idolized Ray and Ann because they were a big. Ray had the best comic book collection in the world when we would go to Koloa. I mean, we could spend the whole summer never doing anything but reading comic books.
Now I know where the pay went for mowing the
Yeah,
lawn.
comic books.
We asked him what he spent his money on, and he said he didn't know. Now we know.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to tell you something.
What?
In 1941,
Yes.
I lived in that.
Oh, you did?
For 3 months, our family lived in that little thing in 1941
Oh, and where are you now?
in Chicago.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, how is it? What, only 3 months?
Well, then we moved to a house around the bend.
Oh.
This was all open, as you know, in those days. But that was just tiny. You've added on to it, but it was just a tiny little
Well, I
house.
don't know who added on to it, but my son-in-law told me.
Yeah,
By bedroom I'm using now, that was a porch.
that's right.
So now the bedroom is narrow.
Right.
Yeah.
4 people lived in that little house.
Oh.
My sister and I and my mom and dad.
Oh.
So he's going to take a little talk story here.
Oh.
The Smiths landed in Honolulu in September of 1940. And when we arrived, we had expected just to have your usual couple of days stop in Honolulu, but it turned out that the State Department had an advisory that warned families from going into the interior of China. So we stopped here waiting for instructions from the headquarters of the CNMA in New York. Well, apparently we never got any instructions, but a kind philanthropist named Richards owned a huge retreat center here on Windward, Oahu, and he put our family up and the Beck family up in one of the weekend cottages just a couple of minutes down the hill from where we're standing. And we were in those cottages for, I'm going to say, maybe as 2.5 months, until this little cottage up here on the side of the hill opened up, and a family of 4, we were here through the winter months. All of the area down below was virgin jungle, you might say, and this little cottage, not nearly as nicely furnished as it is now, housed us for about 3 months. And in the years that I've come back to Kokokahi, it's served as a garage for the family that lived next door for a while, and now it's a home for a nice lady from the Big Island. But after several months, another home up here on the hill opened up, and we're going to take a look at that one too. There's an association that maintains the gardens here. It's called the Association of Friendship Gardens. The idea of the gardens was kind of we would call it today New Age, peace and unity of all races and religions and so forth. But it is a nice walk, and I've done it several times. This circular house behind us is where our 3rd residence here at the Kokokahi Retreat Center, and we lived in that house probably about 4 months until we went to Kauai in September of 1941. I have a picture, a black and white, of a birthday party right up there to the right. There's a bunch of our kids, Sue and Butch and others. So I do remember the fact that you had to climb up the steps to get to the house. You can see the magnificent view of Kaneohe Bay, and had we been here for another 3.5 months, we would have had a ringside seat of the Japanese attack on the Kaneohe Naval Air Station in the far distance. As a family with the Becks, we used to get in our rowboat and go out on that bay and paddle around. Behind us is a house on a parcel of land that was owned by Gertrude Smith. She was probably paid, I'm guessing, in the neighborhood of maybe $500 acreage here, and then needed the money in 1947-48 and sold it probably for maybe a little more than she paid for it. But obviously it has a fantastic vista of the area and probably would be worth in the six figures today if it were just a parcel of land.
This is Chinaman's hat.
Scott May's mother was a Parker. She was part Hawaiian, didn't look Hawaiian, but had Hawaiian, and she was part of the Hawaiian Parker branch. And when let's say her father died, and the senior Parkers, who were the primary owners of the ranch, passed on, there was a will, and the will disappeared. This would have been turn of the century type dating. The will disappeared, the original will, and that branch of the family was disinherited. And the property, all the wealth was acquired by, let's call it the Howley side of the family, the Caucasian side of the family. 50 years later, Scott May rounded up some of his relatives from his side of the family, and they sued the Parker Ranch for what they claimed were their inheritance rights. And the fact that one of the factors in the case was that Scott's mother is buried in the Parker Ranch family cemetery. So there was no grounds for saying that she was not a Parker, and therefore it was as much a nuisance suit as there was a chance of them winning. But Scott, as you know, is a very determined individual, and the lawsuit and the courts dragged on for a number of years. And finally, the current generation of Parkers decided that they would come up with a settlement that would get this cleared once and for all. And so they offered Scott May, basically Scott May at this point, I think the others had kind of dropped out because they had to keep funding a lawyer, and their cousins just weren't going to put up any more money, but Scott persisted. And they offered him several choice pieces of property on Parker Ranch land, and he could take any one of these parcels that he chose. And he picked a parcel that had a view of the ocean and it looked over towards Maui. It's on the way to Kohala. In fact, this lady that we were talking to up in Kokokahi probably lived only about 6 miles away from the parcel that Scott now owns. Well, that was where they were going to retire. They were going to build a retirement home on that land. We heard about this maybe as long ago as 10 years ago. And that seems to have gone by the wayside. But in the meantime, they have fenced it and stocked it with livestock, cattle. And so once or twice a year, Scott will go over and they'll slaughter a cow, I guess, and butcher it, bring back enough meat to feed a small army. So that's the story of this piece of land and how it came about. The Mays also own 2 other parcels on the Big Island. One that is historically interesting is it was literally King Kamehameha I's taro patch, and it is virtually at the end of the road in Kohala, just before you get to the Pumalu lookout. If Scott took me there probably 10-12 years ago when we were going to do a hike into the valley, and we walked up through his property. It's undeveloped, and frankly I think it's maybe leased out as ranch land, but it came into the family probably a century or more ago. And the 3rd parcel once had a little house on it. It's been unoccupied for 50-60 years, and has pretty well been maybe even taken down but in the 60s, when the John Becks lived in Hilo, we would make forays over to the May property and have a picnic on it. It's probably 3 or 4 miles away from the parcel that Scott May got as part of the lawsuit settlement. And Uncle John liked to go over there because during his bottle collecting years, he would go along the stone wall, and he knew that when the Hawaiian workers built those stone walls in the 1800s, they would put their beer and other bottles, tuck it into the pukas in the walls, and build the stone walls around them, so he could find some bottles that weren't broken tucked away in these stone walls, and they'd be valuable artifacts today. Things that shared in that.
Hang on, to your left.
Kaya's store.
Oh my goodness, beautiful. In the summers of 1948 and 49, I worked on the staff for Camp Bergman as a high school sophomore at the end of my sophomore year and at the end of my junior year. The first year I was an assistant counselor and also the clerk in the camp snack shop. The second year I was on the kitchen crew and washed pots and pans. Those were very fun summers, and I learned to play tennis on this camp, and we hiked up in the mountains to the left up here, one excursion, and picked a fruit called a mountain apple way up in that notch. This field is about all that is left from the original layout of the camp that I recognize. This was the softball field, and I tell the story of how in the summer of '48 the parents of the campers came out for one day, and the highlight of the day was a softball game between the campers and counselors versus the fathers of the parents. And one of the parents was the famous disc jockey in Honolulu, J. Akuhead Pupuli. And his son was a camper, so J. Aku played left field, right about where those ironwood trees were. And when I came to bat, I had the pleasure of hitting a home run over J. Aku's head. And obviously have never forgotten it.